Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of Gridiron Gridlocks this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you hit and follow my social media feed and Empty the Benches social media feed as well, ladies and gentlemen. We had a little bit of technical difficulties this morning, but we're back. We're ready for the action. We got a lot of great content coming for you guys this way and this morning of college football. We got a couple of bowl games in there, ladies and gentlemen. We got the Army-Navy game today, so things are on the horizon. But first things first, we got to talk about the latest and greatest of the Shedeur Moore situation that we got going on in that great state up north, the old Michigan Standard, as Dave Portnoy likes to say. We got an update. He, I believe, was released from jail based on what I could gather from ESPN late last night on a $25,000 bond. But the situation of that's going on at the University of Michigan, from the sign stealing scandal to this, it is really having a huge impact on the university and the brand that is the University of Michigan right now, ladies and gentlemen. It is a very hard thing to witness for your rival to go through. You want them to have their downfall, but not like this. It's very disheartening to see what Moore has been going through. And the whole allegations. I won't go too much details. Got to be careful because of monetization. So you guys can check out the news articles on ESPN and around social media to gather the content. Things that I could say could be us getting demonetized, and we do not want that. So I'm going to play it smart. He ended up getting a, charged with 3 crimes, home invasion, and 2 misdemeanors. But at the same time, I don't want to go into too much detail about it because of possible monetization of this episode on that scenario, ladies and gentlemen. But what does the University of Michigan have to do to move on from this scenario? Like, I was talking to some friends. If Michigan was in the playoffs, would this story even drop? That's the first question that we have to ask. If Moore beat Ohio State on rivalry weekend, this story probably wouldn't surface and probably be hush-hush, and he will go on further as such forth. But the thing that is impacting this is Moore had a dream job at the University of Michigan, and he could have got fired probably the next season if he didn't make the college football playoffs. But now he's missing out on $12.3 million part of his contract. Like, he's not going to get paid in that. And it's sad to see because of that. But at the same time, it's just one of those things where what the Big Ten has become the big university, things are falling through the cracks, and that's not acceptable standard right now for the big institutions of the world of college football. We have to look and hold these universities to a standard that is impacting a lot of things. Yes, losing to your rival has an impact, but this has been going on longer than what we've been told based on the information that we've got on this case and on this story. But the things escalating into this matter now reflect at the University of Michigan on the hiring process, what the relationship with the staff is. Like, they have policies, and now people aren't following these policies. So what does the university have to do? Who are they going to bring in to fulfill this job, this campaign at the University of Michigan to get them back to the golden M that they have, their maize and blue, getting back to that golden standard that they have, the Michigan man standard. But right now, they got to take care of I would say things might be coming in threes. So there might be another possible issue at the University of Michigan, but we just do not know at this moment in time what that fosters up to be as we get towards later in the decade. Maybe this is done. Like, maybe they get the right coach in. Now we don't have to worry about the whole Moore situation. But this relationship, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, dates back for a number of years. Cheated on his wife. Like, it's just a very bad image for Moore. And the sad thing is he probably won't get another coaching opportunity after all this. I think he's basically written himself out of college football unless a smaller program is that desperate to hire him. He really didn't have an impressive, go-round. Yes, he beat Ohio State with his 7-5 Michigan squad, 13-10. But then that Ohio State team ends up winning the national championship. Then this year he goes 9-3 and losing to Ohio State. But if he beats Ohio State, we're talking Michigan in the playoffs. This story doesn't release unless it happens the next season when he has a down year and gets fired. Like, maybe this story gets dragged on another year. We don't know, but now this is the reality that we're living in on top of that. But the hearing's over with. I think there could be something that's in the other works, but that's the high level of the story. And we're just going to keep it at that. We don't want to go, like I said, demonetization for certain things that are written in the article. That could be a problem, especially on YouTube. So let's make that clear first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen. But that is that with that case. But let's start talking about the other elephant in the room is Notre Dame opting out of the college football bowl season. Now, we've seen this happen before where a team doesn't make the college football playoffs and they get left out. Like, for example, Florida State, when they go undefeated, they've done everything right, and they get left out of the 4-team playoff format. That was the right year for them to choose to sit out. And I don't think people would fault them for choosing to opt out. But when half the team was opting out and everyone was, deciding to play, and they ended up getting Georgia, you had two courses of action. You opt out and protest the college football playoffs, or you beat the living daylights out of Georgia to make a statement to show that you belong. Because Georgia, I think in the same year, ended up getting left out because they lost to Alabama. So it was two playoff teams that got left out, and they played each other, and Georgia lay a butt whooping on them. It was like, 56-3. Like, that's how bad it was. And it makes them the laughing stock that Florida State ended up becoming to be. But they chose to sit out and chose not to play and be a team in that unison. It's a different story. Now, here for Notre Dame, they played top teams, and they're punished for playing Miami, which is a team that's in the playoffs. And I want to say they played, A&M off the top of my head, off the cusp. But let me just get a quick little fact check in there off of Notre Dame. But they were beating teams convincingly and just trying to find their second loss. Yeah, they lose to A&M at the beginning of the season, and then they go 10 straight wins straight. Now, the question you boil down to is, you lose to Miami by 3 the first week of the season, but if you look at the film, Miami was more physical than Notre Dame, so you're going to give them that edge. But then you lose to A&M by 1 point, and you get left out. But the problem is, it's the loss with Texas to A&M at the end of the season, which probably hurt Notre Dame. BYU falling out of the picture now puts the side-by-side between Miami and Notre Dame. And when you look at that, I don't think you can get around the head-to-head matchup of Miami and Notre Dame. Because if they put Notre Dame in over Miami, I think at that point is, why schedule hard opponents? That's the first thing we have to ask. Why schedule the hard opponents when you are going to get left out in that sense? But for Alabama, in this scenario, ladies and gentlemen, that we have right now, is they lose to Georgia pretty badly in this scenario that it's hard to wrap my head around. Sure, they lose by 3 touchdowns, 28-7, but Georgia was physically putting Alabama in their place, and that's basically revenging that loss. However, they didn't move in the ranks. Georgia stayed at 3, Alabama stayed at 9. But if you look at the teams that played in their conference championship games, they ended up moving down in their ranks. For example, Texas Tech stayed and BYU dropped. I would say they ended up dropping. So, BYU ended up moving down to 12. And they were 11. So, moving down one spot. So, in theory, same with Ohio State. They lost to Indiana by 3. They moved down to 2. Makes sense. Perfectly fine. Everyone's still in the playoffs. However, when you take a look at Alabama and they lose by 3 touchdowns, why don't they get moved down? That's the question that we can't wrap our head around as college football fans. Notre Dame goes 10 games straight and then. But now, at the same time, you just can't deal with what is Notre Dame going up into this matchup, ladies and gentlemen? I can't tell you what they have to do to get the job done. Now there's talks about trying to write in a rule that Notre Dame gets an automatic bid. Now we have bigger cans of worms we're starting to open up with this 12-team playoff format. Does it branch to 14? So if Notre Dame has a 10-2 season, they automatically get a bid because they are Notre Dame and their shiny, mystical golden helmets that we have of Notre Dame. But at the same time, the ACC kind of screwed up Notre Dame because Duke ended up winning it, which ended up knocking off Virginia. Now you have even a bigger case on your hands. Let's say if Virginia did win it, they're the highest conference champion going in, and they would be playing the 12th seed most likely. No, they would be the 4th seed, and they would be playing, they would be the 11th seed, and they'd probably be playing Ole Miss when there's a chance that they could actually beat Ole Miss without their head coach. Like, there's a scenario where that happens. But no, ladies and gentlemen, what does the committee have to do? Do we get rid of the automatic bowl bid for your conference championship game? I don't want to say you don't get rid of that, but some people say you kind of have to, because you have teams that are sitting in the top 12 that are kind of left out. Like BYU gets punished for playing Texas Tech and now left out of the college football playoffs. But if you look at their rankings, they are the 12th best team in the country. And they're not in because we have James Madison in, which they earned their right. They played in their conference championship game and they got their bid. Like, I think you have to leave your conference championship bid in. But the question is, do we need to expand the playoff field? The playoff field as it is, the more we expand, let's say 16 teams, you lose the discussion and the debate of who gets in. Like, you get to certain teams where they're always in automatically, depending on the records. You're going to get the Ohio States, the Michigans, the A&Ms, the Alabamas, the Georgias of the world getting it in each and every year. And then you have like middle of the road B teams fighting for the, maybe 12 through 16 slot if we expand to 16 teams. Like, do we need to expand to 14 teams and get rid of buys altogether where everyone just plays and we just work our way up to the national championship game? Buys are not worth it anymore, and then we play forward. But at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, we got to get our head around what we need to do to get this college football back on track. From Notre Dame opting out, everyone's calling them a laughingstock because they got left out. It would be different if they were undefeated and left out, because then it's just like they played Miami and A&M, and they get left out because Alabama, losing the conference championship game to Georgia by 3 possessions, looked prettier on paper. But it's just one of those saying, like, there's going to be years where teams get left out for having a good record, and we need a better system. Like, what are we looking at? Like, is it the strength of schedule that matters? Is it who the opponents you play out of conference matter? Do we need to change bowl season altogether where you're worried about your out-of-conference schedule? Well, I did hear this on Instagram, ladies and gentlemen, that what happens if the teams we play during the bowl season and we move them to week 1? The whole premise of the bowl games is facing similar competition to you. So it's teams that have the same caliber to you on top of that. So that is one of those things that could be an interesting argument where week 1 is who you're going up against. So in this hypothetical scenario, week 1, we could see Michigan and Texas playing each other week 1 if this was a realistic approach on top of that. But I'm going to continue to look at more of the college football schedule. For bowls, another week 1 matchup we would end up seeing is Boise State versus Washington. I think we would know what would end up happening there. But then we're also looking at, Alabama would play Oklahoma in that, bowl game week 1. Then outside of that, you look at Washington State versus Utah State, Toledo versus Louisville. We got some good, interesting matchups coming into week 1 of the college football season if We let the bowl games dictate week 1 of the college football season. Now imagine this. Penn State, Clemson, week 1. You're telling me you would not turn on your TV week 1 if we had that matchup. Teams evenly matched. You got, Dabo Swinney, Penn State, that environment. And let's say, who has home field advantage? We're going to send Penn State to Death Valley. That is a primetime 7:30 kickoff matchup, Big Ten ACC matchup. You can't get better. Then another good matchup we got, ladies and gentlemen, is Georgia Tech and BYU. Georgia Tech will go to BYU and play in that game. That is a fantastic matchup that we got going on right there if this was week 1. Then you have LSU, Houston, week 1 would be interesting as well. Possible upset. And the thing is, LSU wouldn't be playing in their Death Valley. They would be going on the road to Houston. Again, I know that wouldn't happen, but let that sit and manifest right there. Then you have Tennessee, Illinois at Champaign, another beautiful spot. USC, TCU, another great matchup if this was week 1 of the college football season, ladies and gentlemen. On top of that, Vanderbilt, Iowa. Oh, my goodness. Iowa's defense trying to keep Vanderbilt at bay. Oh, a beautiful slate that we could have. Duke, Arizona State, Nebraska, Utah in the mix. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, we would have some interesting week 1 matchups if that was true. Now, like I said, the things we are looking for in the college football scenario has just been not even horrific to watch, but one of those things that we don't truly fully comprehend. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about, the college football playoff scenario. We got very, very interesting matchups across the board. We got Alabama, Friday, December 19th. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week, ladies and gentlemen. But we'll build up to it, how this is going to look. Oklahoma, Alabama, Friday, December 19th, 8 p.m. Eastern time on ABC and ESPN, and it's in Oklahoma. Guys, Alabama might be in some serious trouble. I don't want to go too much detail. We'll save that for next week's episode. But there might be trouble on the horizon. And this is the problem I'm talking about. Oklahoma already beat Alabama. So why are they getting another shot right now? Like, think about it. This should be Notre Dame in the 9th spot, or Miami facing Oklahoma, and Notre Dame would be facing A&M. That's how it should have been. Like, I think the AP poll, ladies and gentlemen, got the rankings right on how they ended up saying. Here's the rankings that we have. We have for the AP poll. We have Indiana, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, Texas Tech 4, Oregon 5, Ole Miss 6, A&M 7, number 8, Oklahoma, number 9, Notre Dame, number 10, Miami, number 11, Alabama, number 12, BYU. And most likely, if we're keeping the highest ranked conference champions, we would remove Alabama, we would remove BYU. And the problem is, you could probably swap Notre Dame and Miami, depending how you want to value the head-to-head, and say it's a different team and all that stuff. Like that's what we got. But in theory, if we're going to use the AP polls, Notre Dame should be facing Oklahoma right now, and Miami's still facing A&M. But think about it. Notre Dame, Oklahoma is a big ticket matchup. We still got a big ticket matchup with Miami and A&M. Tulane, Ole Miss is going to be interesting. I could see Tulane giving Ole Miss a hard time without the head coach in Lane Kiffin. I can see that happening. We could also see that it's going to come down to the wire, but it just depends what Tulane we get. If we're going to have a Tulane that's going to be physical, saying, hey, we got a chance to do something first in program history, I think those players want to make a statement. Same with Ole Miss players, but they're in the SEC. They're saying we can get back here next year without a problem. Tulane, on the other hand, may not be back here next year. So they're going to try to find a way to be scrappy to get to the quarterfinals and make a statement. And then the last of the least, ladies and gentlemen, James Madison going up to Oregon in Eugene, Oregon. I don't know what James Madison has to do, but if they pull up the biggest Cinderella upset, knocking off number 5 Oregon, it will send catastrophic ripples in the college football playoffs. Because then it starts to say, hey, adding the group of 5 in the college football playoffs is not a bad idea. But if they're getting blown out, we're leaving 2 teams that could be playing out of this discussion, Notre Dame and BYU. And BYU's only losses to the number 4 team in the country, which is Texas Tech. And they lost to them twice. And yes, both in bad fashion. But, ladies and gentlemen, we got to figure this out. What do we got to do? Like, the college football playoffs are there. And we just, like I said, we have problems in the system that we have. It's not a perfect system. Getting rid of the conference champions to get an automatic bid, yeah, that they weren't the favorites going in. We all saw that happen. But that's what happened. But, ladies and gentlemen, we need a solution. And I don't think expanding the field does it justice. Do we need to go back to the BCS system and have a calculated formula to spit out an answer? Because with committees, we have biased opinion that is changing week to week. Do we need to get rid of the whole college football selection show until everything's all said and done and all the resumes are finished? Like we do for March Madness. Like you play your conference championship game, the committee gets together on Sunday, and it's a 2-hour show, and we end up dropping who gets in. But the thing is, with that discussion, the committee needs to lay out the groundwork for what schools have to do to get into the college football playoffs. Do we need to change schedules? Do we need to have teams revamp their out-of-conference schedules instead of playing them in the beginning? Do we need to sprinkle them in at the end? Or do you need a out-of-conference opponent that's in the group of 4 or Power 5, or in the Power 4 and the group of 5, sprinkle that in throughout the season? So you get a Power 4 team week 1, a group of 5 team in the middle, and then another, Power 4 at the end of the season. Like, is that what we need to do? Like week 1, we get, Texas and Michigan. Week 2, Michigan would play Tulane in that scenario. Oh, and then the last week, they'll play Alabama. Like, is that the resume that we're looking for? Where it's like you have teams are in the playoffs, and it's like you have that eye test for the teams at the tail end of the season that have the highest chances to get in of the college football playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. But also the whole thing we need to end up looking at across the board. I know I've been on the whole soapbox about the college football playoffs and what that ends up looking for everyone on top of that. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's one of those things that we need to take a quick look at and definitely take a quick peek. I will definitely take a quick, looking at in the offseason, breaking it down as we sit down and start thinking about all that wonderful stuff of college football. But that's the things we need to start looking at for the most part. I know without some of the other banners that we got going on today is the Heisman Trophy winner, not the winner, but the ceremony going on for sure, most likely tonight, ladies and gentlemen. But the Heisman Trophy winner, not winner, I need to stop saying winner because we haven't won it. No one has won it yet on top of that. But for the most part, ladies and gentlemen, we got it's really kind of end up setting itself up for the most part of what's going on into this scenario of the Heisman Trophy winner. I think Mendoza is definitely going to make a statement, make a splash in the college football Heisman Trophy ceremony, knocking off the number 1 team in the country, ladies and gentlemen, in Ohio State, is probably what solidified his moment. He had basically 3 Heisman moments this entire season, 3. And if we take a look at that, is beating Oregon on the road, winning by 10 in that fashion, the 2-minute drive at Penn State, and then knocking off Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. His resume of those Heisman moments gets the job done. And if you look at the other players like Julian Sayin, yes, he had one of the greatest completing percentage of 78.4% for completed passes, 31 touchdowns and 6 interceptions with over 3,000 yards passing compared to Indiana's quarterback. But the thing is that you got the head-to-head. You saw them battle it out. You saw the stats. Julian Sayin had the better receiving core. But Mendoza found a way to win in the key critical moments. What is Julian Sayin's Heisman Trophy moment? What is it? What is it? Beating Texas, only winning 14-7? His stats were okay to get the job done, but it wasn't like he was gunslinging, making him look like a statement, knocking off Texas and Arch Manning. But, having a dominant performance for Michigan. But again, ladies and gentlemen, he didn't have a signature Heisman moment. And that's probably why he didn't win it. Like, if he beat Indiana, yeah, that's probably his Heisman, and he ends up getting it. But then he had Jeremiah Smith. If Jeremiah Smith went off in the Big Ten championship game, he could have won it. But those two basically eliminated themselves. Then you have Love at Notre Dame. Great, season, but they're not in the college football playoffs. So, it kind of eliminates them a little bit. Then you have Diego at Vanderbilt, another great season. Best win is Tennessee, looking very good at the end of the year. And then you had his win at LSU, not an easy task being from, Vanderbilt. But his completing, passing percentage was 71%, not too shabby. But he threw for, 3,192 passing yards on top of that, ladies and gentlemen. So, that being said, our Heisman Trophy winner, on what I ended up shaking down and breaking it with the highest possibility and the high favorite, Mendoza from Indiana. I think it's cut and dry. And he had the Heisman moments that we were all looking for, that we look at Heisman Trophy winners of past. He is going to join that elite fraternity of being a Heisman Trophy winner. He fits the build. He has the emotion. He has the heart. He has the people believing. He is America's golden boy at this point. I don't want to say America's golden boy, but America's rooting for him to win. They are the Cinderella team that is no longer Cinderella. They are the number one team in the country. They got to get humbled real quick before they face Alabama or Oklahoma, because that's going to be another steadfast battle. Because if they get past that and Oregon magically slips up and you have Texas Tech, there's a scenario where Indiana faces Texas Tech, and boy, that is going to be an electric game if Texas Tech find a way to shut down Oregon against, that matchup. But let's look at that hypothetical, though, ladies and gentlemen. Before we get that down to the breakdown, you have a Heisman Trophy winner that could basically get to the national championship game. They've beaten Oregon before. It's going to be hard to beat them a second time, but they know they have the wits to do it, and they're going to try to believe again to get Indiana to their national championship. And keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, Indiana has the worst losing percentage in the country, if not the entire college football slate. It's insane of what has gone on to that program, that transformation that we have witnessed, ladies and gentlemen, going down at Indiana. And them getting the Heisman Trophy, I think will send that program leaps and bounds and will make a testament to what Indiana has going on for the most part going into this college football season and wrapping up their great 13-0 undefeated season, ladies and gentlemen. But without further ado, let's talk about, the game that we're all looking forward to out of the remaining rivalries. And even though we do have some bowl games going on today, I didn't realize that. I thought it was just going to be only the Army-Navy game today, ladies and gentlemen. But for our bowl games, we have the Army-Navy game at 3 o'clock today, ladies and gentlemen. But at noon, at the noon hour, we got I guess I want to say South Carolina State against, I want to say, Prairie View and the Cricket Celebration Bowl at noon on ABC to kick off bowl season. And then later tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we got Boise State, Washington to Bucked Up Bowl, LA at 8 p.m. Eastern time, ladies and gentlemen, on ABC. So got a full slate there, but the Army-Navy preview show, let's get down to it. Navy, Army, great years that they've been having. Army, a little bit on a down year, ladies and gentlemen. They're 6-5 with a 4-4 American Conference record compared to Navy. Only 2 losses to Notre Dame and Northern Texas, which is what kept Navy out of the American Conference Championship game. But if they didn't lose to North Texas, they would have reached and faced Tulane in the American Championship game, and we could be talking about Navy playing in the college football playoffs. That's how close Navy was of reaching the college football playoffs this year, ladies and gentlemen. They were a win away. Well, basically 2 wins away from making that happen. And boy, America would have loved to see the midshipmen of Navy to be in the college football playoffs. And a lot of people would be rooting for Navy to do something crazy in that run. But ladies and gentlemen, they don't got the talent like that, even though they are some of the nation's finest men out there, ladies and gentlemen. But losing to Notre Dame 49-10 does not help your case of trying to reach the college football playoffs. And a lot of their games, ladies and gentlemen, Navy has been playing close. But that's what we're going to get with the military academies. We're going to get a hard-nosed football game where it's tooth and nail and finding their way to win and take care of business in that game. But ladies and gentlemen, Navy has been passing the ball a good amount, ladies and gentlemen. On top of that, Army trying to find ways, but they're squeaking out victories. They beat Temple University 14-13. They ended up beating Air Force. They lose to the team that's in the college football playoffs by 7, Tulane 24-17. So we are going to get a hard-nosed football game at 3 p.m. today, ladies and gentlemen, on CBS. But you should check out the uniforms, ladies and gentlemen, of Army and Navy. Navy is busting out a celebratory uniform to honor the U.S. Navy for being around for 250 years since the nation has founded, to honor the Navy during that time. To have a cool outfit. I forget what Army's outfit is, ladies and gentlemen, but the game of Army-Navy is not by passing yards to set the difference. It's a game where the clock keeps moving, you keep running that ball, and you want to sing second in this game. That's the whole premise of this game. You have cadets that study at the other university for an entire semester, and they get released back to their home institutions during this game. This game is in Baltimore, Maryland. Basically, it's a Navy home game on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, and basically not too far from Annapolis, Maryland on top of that. So it is a Navy game, a Navy atmosphere, and I bet you Navy is going to try to make a statement in this game to saying, hey, we got another 10-2 season, and we're going to get back to the way of domination that Navy always knows and can find a way to do over Army. Sure, I could be a little bit biased, but ladies and gentlemen, Navy is going to take it to Army today in this clear, epic fashion battle of the Army-Navy game, ladies and gentlemen. On top of that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the preluding game and part of bowl season a little bit. Little tidbit, little teaser for some of the bowl games we got going on here. We're going to start with the, primetime 8 o'clock slot game, Boise State, Washington. 9-4, 8-4. There's not too much you can really add to it. Washington's -10 going into it. But, ladies and gentlemen, we're looking down at the quarterbacks. There's not too much, nothing too flashy out there. Like I said, Boise State's last, few games, they got their conference championship, I believe, in the Mountain West. I want to say being UNLV 38-21, Utah State in a good fashion, 24-20, the 25-24 victory, and then knocking off Colorado State leading up around the week prior to Thanksgiving, 49-21. But Washington tough, heartbreaking loss to Oregon to wrap up their season after rivalry week to 26-14, but taking care of UCLA to 48-14, knocking off Purdue 49-13, losing to Wisconsin 13-10, and taking care of Illinois back in October, ladies and gentlemen, to 42-25, ladies and gentlemen. This matchup is going to be hard fought. Washington's defense gave Ohio State's offense a time that made them struggle. But keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, Ohio State didn't really score in the first quarter. Ohio State's offense was slow. I wouldn't say sluggish. They are just a slow-moving machine, which is going to probably hurt them in this playoff run if they get behind the 8 ball and start trailing. But Washington, ladies and gentlemen, has that defense to keep Boise State at bay. Boise State needs to be multi-dimensional to give themselves a chance. They can't be one-dimensional, can't rely on the run game. They got to run play action, quick slants, find ways to march down the field and make it feel like it's easier to beat this Washington team. Now, granted, you're going to have players opt out of Washington, so it's really hard to evaluate the games that we got going on during bowl season, which is why it's a little bit problematic to sit there and try to figure this all out and who's playing and who's not in this scenario. So I digress in the scenario with Boise State and Washington, but I want to hope that Washington gets this victory. But at the same time, I don't know who's playing in the bowl games. I don't know who's going to be opting out because, like, that's 8 o'clock. Like, we are well away from kickoff, and there could be players opting out right up to the last minute on top of that. So it is what it is. I'm going to leave that game at bay. But on Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen, nothing really too exciting. You got Old Dominion, South Florida, pretty good on that. Then you also have Troy, Jack State. Nothing really to talk about that. And you got Louisiana and Delaware going at it on Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen. Again, 6-6 for both teams. Nothing too flashy for the most part. But we're going to start getting a little bit good on Friday, December 19th. Oh, I forgot December 18th. You got Missouri State and Arkansas State. Nothing for the Xbox Bowl. Again, nothing flashy there. But then, ladies and gentlemen, Friday, December 19th, going into that matchup, ladies and gentlemen, we start building up. We got Kennesaw State, a fantastic year. 10-3, a great year for them against Western Michigan in a beautiful bowl game. But it's at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We need to figure out these bowl games now. Why are we playing a bowl game at 11 a.m. during a Friday during a work week? When there's really, you could throw that game on Thursday at 7 o'clock or even 8 o'clock even. Why? Why are we doing this to ourselves, ESPN and the College Football Committee? Why? Make it make sense, unless there's other sport events on why they can't do that. But keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. After that, on Friday, we got Memphis versus NC State, another great matchup in there. 8-4 Memphis, 7-5 NC State. Should be a fun one to watch, which then builds up the magnitude. I should say, before I get into that game, you have that game's at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, ladies and gentlemen, on ESPN. Why? Why at 2:30? People at work, unless you're saying people are off on this Friday. Make it make sense, guys. Please make it make sense. Then you get into the first round of the college football playoffs. You get Oklahoma, Alabama, the tide that rolls on. Like I said, does Alabama belong there? Does it make sense? Do we need to figure out what needs to be done to get the job done? Explain, answers, questions. If Alabama gets blown out and only scores 3 points, was it better to put Notre Dame into that scenario? We'll talk. We'll dive into that matchup more of next week, ladies and gentlemen. Outside of that, you roll into more of the Saturday games on December 20th. You got Miami, Texas A&M, Tulane, Ole Miss, James Madison, and Oregon to wrap up the playoff slot on that Saturday, December 20th. Then you get to Monday, December 22nd with the Idaho famous Potato Bowl, which I should probably eat some French fries on that day, but I'll be home during the holidays, so probably won't be snacking on French fries, but maybe I should just make a run to McDonald's during lunch to grab some fries to make me feel a little bit better about eating fries for that game for the Washington State, Utah State, famous Idaho Potato Bowl game. If I was at that game, I feel like that'd be fun to be at, but that's all the way out in Boise, Idaho, which would be a fun experience. Maybe one year I'll take the flight out there to just say I was at that game, even though there's really no stakes for me being out there, but it'd just be a fun experience. After that, you can start rolling to December 23rd, Toledo, Louisville at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Western Kentucky, Southern Miss on the Tuesday, December 3rd, the 23rd for the New Orleans Bowl. Then you got UNLV, Ohio Bowl game for the Coffee Bowl. California, Cal versus Hawaii on Christmas Eve at 8 p.m. And then you got games on Christmas Day of Central Michigan, Northwestern, and you have New Mexico, Minnesota at the Rate Bowl. UIF versus UTSA on the 26th of December. Then the 27th of December, you got Pitt, East Carolina, Penn State, Clemson, UConn Army, Georgia Tech, BYU, Miami versus Fresno State, Texas Tech versus San Diego State, Virginia versus Missouri, LSU versus Houston. Then you get to December 29th, App State versus Georgia, I want to say Southern, Coastal versus Louisiana Tech, Tennessee, Illinois, USC, TCU, and then you start rolling into Wednesday of the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs, with Ohio State being in the Cotton Bowl, and you have Iowa, Vanderbilt noon that day, Duke versus Arizona State at 2 p.m. on that Wednesday. You have Michigan versus Texas at 3 p.m. and in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, which makes no sense. It should have been like, tangerines being with citrus, or fine. It would be apple. Apple would make sense, but it's not, that we need citrus brand company out there. We need citrus brands right there, ladies and gentlemen. We need the grapefruit company to really sponsor the Citrus Bowl. Let's make that clear. Well, I'm surprised we don't have an Avocados from Mexico Bowl, to be honest, but I digress. You got Nebraska versus Utah, and then you get January 1st with the remaining bowl games of the quarterfinals with Texas Tech, Indiana, Georgia, and then you have January right versus Texas State, Navy versus Cincinnati, Arizona versus SMU, Wake Forest versus Mississippi State. And then you start getting the semifinals on Thursday, January 8th, and Friday, January 9th is the other college football playoff semifinals, which is the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl down in Atlanta. And then we wrap it up on the national championship on Monday, the 19th of January, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN, ladies and gentlemen. That is your bowl games of who is playing who on those given days. So make sure you check ESPN and all those stuff ringing in for the most part. But ladies and gentlemen, that is Bowl Mania on top of that. Wow. Now, going in for the remaining 15 minutes that we have left in today's program, I am starting to think about what we got coming up in the new year for Gridiron Gridlock and the beautiful things we got going on for this program. Yes, it's being streamed on my other YouTube channel that I have, is 6 for 6. So make sure you check that one out. On top of that, so you have other destinations as well. Check out the ETB, Empty the Bench Network's other shows as well. We have Gridiron Gurus tomorrow. They got a fun-filled slate as they talk about Phillip Rivers joining in the Colts to play against the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday for Week 15 of the NFL season. So those guys got a handful of what's going on for their scheduled program. But for us, for Gridiron Gridlock, we'll be doing, I would say, shows through the holidays. We won't really have much of a break. I would say for the most part, we'll be, we'll still be creating the content, still do our best to do broadcasting on top of that, ladies and gentlemen. But furthermore, I would say once college football wraps up, we'll be making our way into March Madness a little bit. I need to start doing my due diligence to get out to some of the Ohio State March Madness games, not March Madness games, but games around. A lot of times they're during the weekdays or during the weekends. Weekends will be easier, but if they're at noon, it kind of impacts, I would say, Gridiron Gridlock a little bit. So I could probably bump it up slightly earlier if necessary. If the games are later in the evening, makes it a lot easier to get to, have more of a blast, I would say, for the most part. But that's where the direction we're going. I would say Gridiron Gridlock will kind of, let's say, slow down pace after March Madness a little bit, but we would still have the recruiting season. We'll try to figure out what we'll do in the summertime. We might create another program to focus on the World Cup and all those matchups going on. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's one of those things where we'll divvy it up and figure out what we're going to do in the offseason. We could talk about, softball in college, the College World Series in the mix as well. We can truly be a college-centric show. I think what we could do to make it a little bit more interesting, really depending, is maybe, like I was talking about earlier, like last week's episode, going to other colleges and going to those games, taking pictures and sharing it on ETB on the Instagram side. Maybe we create a Gridiron Gridlock of we just scoring college campuses and showing the highlights of the colleges around campus, like going to their basketball games, going to football games, walking the campus, trying local cuisine almost, just like being there, taking the pictures of the college campuses. I think we can certainly do that, find ways to work it in. It's going to be a lot of money. Let's make that being clear and frank and honest with all you guys if I was doing a little tour. But within Ohio, there's so many universities that I could do, which would only be like really the first time I was like a 2-hour drive going up to Toledo. But I can go up to Akron. I could go Youngstown would be about 2.5 hours, give or take, getting up to that point. But we can do Dayton. We can do Cincinnati. We can do, like I said, Toledo, Akron, Kent State, Ohio, Bowling Green. Like, there are schools for me to tour within the state of Ohio. If I'm very adventurous, I could even branch up to Michigan if I wanted to and explore the Big House and just walk around the campus. I've been up to the Big House already before. So actually going there to eat food and wear Ohio State stuff and get booed and spat on and while I go up there, that is a own animal in itself. But also a 3-hour drive, I could go to the University of Pitt and walk their campus and watch their stuff, or go down to West Virginia and watch the Mountaineers play. Like, there's things for me to do. I can take the trek out to Indiana, go to Purdue or University of Indiana as well. On top of that, go up to South Bend and Notre Dame. Like, there's stuff for me to do in the Midwest where it sounds like a great touring rendition of what we got going on. Keep it within like a day weekend trip so I don't have to really do too much. Where if I could make it a day trip, fantastic. If I have to get a random hotel stay, I mean, I could probably get a hotel that's probably underneath $100 and stay the night and drive back Sunday. Like, I could easily do that and make a little college road trip with Gridiron Gridlock. Maybe we'll make a little segment of college road trips, or get on me with make a AI picture of me on a road trip bus and just going there. Like, I could bring my laptop, do a little recording session in the hotel room, if the hotel room has a desk. Some hotel rooms do not have desks, so I will have to figure that one out if I have to cross that bridge. But I think it'd be a little fun tidbit of me doing those college road trips. I would say, even though I've done my college fair share of college road trips and seeing beautiful campuses in my area. I've been to Washington. I've been to NC State. I've been to Florida State. I've been to Florida. I've been to USF. I've been down to SMU. I've seen my fair share of schools. On top of that, I've walked Northwestern. Like I said, I've done my fair share of tours, but I think I should bring that to you guys. I should bring that experience. I should also share like March Madness when I go. Like I've been to very consistently been going to March Madness. I last year I went to the women's around a 32 when Ohio State played Tennessee. Got basically in the double A section for $39. Like that is unheard of for March Madness for one game. Like that is a perfect for the women. I will be hands down to do that again for sure. I'll be keeping my eyes up. I think I'll probably work with Nick to try to sprinkle in some content of me going to these college events. But that might be a 2026 campaign on top of that. I think it might be easier to get into, the softballs of the world because some of the college sports outside the major ones have free admission. So to me, it's just me getting myself there. Like there is things that we can definitely cover on Gridiron Gridlock. You just got to hop in the car and just kind of go. I know that's going to put a lot of miles on my car on that for the most part, but I can deal with that when I cross that bridge of just doing a little college road trip. I could probably do one maybe once a month. I don't think that's too much on the wallet for one weekend out of the month, just doing a nice little road trip out and about and just really living life for the most part on top of that. But ladies and gentlemen, we like those ideas for the most part. Just going around, I think that, like I said, the MAC conference is probably going to be our best friends outside of the Big Ten to really explore what we got going on. Yes, we got the Big 12 with West Virginia and Cincinnati, but we're MAC country out here outside of the Big Ten. Like that's basically what we are. We are a MAC conference in the state of Ohio, outside of Ohio State, in the Big Ten coming through. But short and condensed, like I've driven past Bowling Green. Like I was leaving from Ann Arbor from the Michigan-Minnesota game, and I saw, oh, wow, Bowling Green's playing. You drive off of Interstate 75. It's right there. That's how close it is. Like I said, it's not a bad journey to get through to these college towns. Like I would say, like if I do it, I would need like recommendation. That's where you guys come in, the fans. You tell me where to go, like what food to get. Like if you're in that college town, I could do a meetup. I get to meet you guys. We could do maybe a little show and bring you on and talk college sports. Almost have a little, comedians with coffee almost, but like a college football rendition. Like maybe we go to a local campus bar. We set up shop. We do a little recording session. I know I'll have to get the, campus bar's approval or a brewery's approval, sit down and do it. But there's things that we can do and get a little sponsored. Shout out that local brew or a local bar or local restaurant on top of that to just show you guys the college experience. And that's what Gridiron Gridlock can do. We can highlight those small markets. We can share what greatness these college towns have to offer. Like I could really do a great American road trip with this and make the trek out to Happy Valley. Boy, Happy Valley would be one of the, not the longest ones, but it's good over 5.5 hours to get to Happy Valley for me. But there might be a coincidence where I go out there and experience that firsthand, ladies and gentlemen. But I think we got some things to work. I'll sit down with Callan and Nick to really hammer that down. I like kicking the can around for the idea of that, ladies and gentlemen. But it's one of those things we'll fester over and let it marinate for a couple weeks. And we might do it. We might go once a month where we just go on a road trip. Like, get up Saturday morning. Well, we still got to do Gridiron Gridlock. So that might be a tricky thing. If it's one of those road trips, I mean, I could drive if I was in the state, with it being in the state of Ohio for some of these schools, I could drive Friday night right after work, get a nice hotel stay, spend the night, get up Saturday, tour around, and then leave literally Saturday evening, and then get back to Columbus. It's like, there's ways to do it. Like, do the show from the hotel room, and then from there you'd walk around, talk to locals. If I had a mic where I could just do like a live stream, walk around, that would be cool. But I know that would take so much space up on my phone. I would need a partner in crime to do that with. So like I said, there's things that we can make Gridiron Gridlock, if not one of the best shows today of actually capturing the experience. And having, maybe even if we do that, that might convince people to go to certain schools based off my experience of being on that college campus, walking and seeing those famous spots where it has campus lures. It'd be funny if I just randomly join a college tour and just sit in the background and just like walk around as they highlight their college campus. Like, I could do that if I wanted to. Now, granted, if I did do that and they find out that, that some universities might make me charge if I build that kind of popularity or following. But if I'm just there walking around minding my own business and just experience the college campus, I see nothing wrong with that. I did it with the University of Illinois and just walked. I just walked. Some beautiful shots, beautiful pictures. I don't think I posted on my social media, though. I did post on my Facebook, but I don't think I posted on my personal. On top of that, ladies and gentlemen, but at the same point in time, but let me just check my personal social media. No, I did not post the University of Illinois on my actual personal page for that, but I remember to post the first ever college football playoff game in the shoe. So I do have that on my Instagram. So if you're generally curious about that, definitely give that a check out. For the most part, outside of the college trip and exploring certain things, parking is also another thing. But if I can find a free street parking and walk my way to the stadiums, we'll solve that problem as well. But yeah, give food recommendations of college towns that I should check out. Like, if I'm in town, stop by and say so-and-so recommended me to you guys. And then I'll probably ask, like, hey, what's the go-to? Is it a Reuben? Is it a sandwich that they have? Is it an infamous thing where you have to get the university's ice cream or something like that? Like, there are things. I'm not going to be trying to buy merch and all that stuff. But if you see me on those campuses, and as this gains a bigger following, definitely please stop to say hi. Like, we're going to try to build that traction where it is the cream of the crop for the most part, ladies and gentlemen, the best of the best, where we get that opportunity to highlight everything of those college campuses. As we wind down with the remaining moments of the show, we want to thank everyone who supported Gridiron Gridlock for the start of its first season, but the start of it going toward the tail end of the college football season. Like I said, we got a lot of great stuff coming your way in 2026. ETB is just getting bigger and better. So make sure you keep supporting, keep watching our shows to really highlight of how great we are as a network to really build up the excitement of what we got cooking and brewing for 2026. Like I said, Callan and Nick and everyone at ATB is putting a lot of hours, a lot of great stuff into it. So 2026, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, will be bigger, will be better, and we'll have so much excitement. We don't know what to do with it, and we want to share that with you guys every step of the way. So thank you so much for supporting us. Make sure you have a safe and a smart holiday season. Please don't do something stupid. If you have a live tree, make sure you water your tree. Don't leave your Christmas lights on overnight if you fall asleep. Please, we want you to have a holiday with your friends and family. I understand some people may not have that luxury, and the holidays are very tough. So if you have friends going through that, please reach out to them. Make sure you're checking up on one another, because we're all, I wouldn't say family at the end of the day, but we all want to make sure everyone has a safe holiday season. So make sure you check up on your loved ones and those you don't reach out to that much. They really appreciate when you do reach out for it. Without further ado, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Gridiron Gridlock, and we'll catch you next time. So long for now. Bye-bye.